All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap. I'm super excited about this one in particular. But before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for any of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use your question and answer tab there on your interface and submit your question, and we will try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. We also have a drawing at the end of today's webinar for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is how high-performing teams automate artifact management with CI/CD. Our speakers today are Ryan Peterson, who is the Solutions Engineer at CircleCI, Ali Sardar, who is the Senior Product Manager at JFrog, and Jeff Fry, who is the Senior Technical Alliance Manager at JFrog. Gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Well, Ryan, I know you're going to kick off the conversation, so I'm going to take myself off camera, put myself on mute, and let you get right to it.
All right, thank you. And hey, so as just said, I'm Ryan Pedersen. I'm a solutions engineer here at CircleCI, just by way of quick introductions before we kick it officially off. As a solutions engineer, I help customers, mostly in the pre-sale side, get onboarded on the CircleCI, get their config set up, speed things up, and really get moving. So here to answer any technical questions at the end as well. I'm looking forward to presenting.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And I'm Jeff Fry, Senior Technical Alliance Manager on the business development team. Don't let the title fool you. I actually came out from our partner engineering team. So part of what I do is help the business development team, working with their technology partners, help them on the technical aspects of it. But at heart, I'm still an engineer. And then I'll hand it over to Ali.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Ali. I'm a Senior Product Manager at JFrog, and I'm part of their partnerships team responsible for the platform and partnership and ecosystems for JFrog.
All right. So in terms of what we had prepared for today, agenda, I'm going to just kick off with a couple things on CircleCI. So introducing CI/CD, CircleCI in particular, CircleCI orbs, what those are, how to use them. Going to hand it over to JFrog, go through some of the architecture. So Ollie's going to lead us through that. And then Jeff and I will be kicking off a demo of both products. And then the rest of the time is for y'all. So any questions you have, feel free to add those in the chat, the Q&A, or can wait to the end and add them then. Okay, so on to CircleCI and our mission. So CircleCI, our mission is to empower technology-driven companies to do their best work. Do this by making engineering teams more productive through intelligent automation. And when we say idea to delivery, we really mean is anything from that ideation stage until the time it hits the hands of the customers. So bug fixes, implementations, big features, new products, hot fixes, to help developers and teams focus on what they're hired to do, and we handle the automation piece. A background on CircleCI, founded in 2011, growing fast. We should probably update this slide daily. I know I think over 100 more employees now and more builds per day, so growing day by day. Customers in all types of industries, different sizes, different points in their trajectories. So from single developers building a product to unicorns to Fortune 100. Work with thousands of customers and run millions of builds per day. It means we've seen it all. So highly flexible in terms of things that one can do inside the platform. And then back to that concept of ideation to delivery. On the left here, we see the VCS, so where all the code lives. This is taking all the updates from developers, ingesting it, and all the way to the right, that's where the code's deployed. So shipping off a container, deploying to a Kubernetes cluster, interacting with JFrog, wherever. The middle part here is CircleCI, so we're automating the building, testing, and delivery of that code. And on to some more of the specifics on using CircleCI, the things I typically see from customers getting on board and they're useful. First things are commits, triggering, pipelines. Good CI really enables the business to be more nimble, meet customer needs faster. Good CI is also GitOps. Really everything lives inside of a config file, lives in Git, lives in source control, defines exactly which jobs the pipeline needs to run and in which order. And then anytime there's a change at that VCS level, kicks off a pipeline, we follow the specifications set up in the config. We can have jobs running conditionally, different levels of resources for compute, parallelism, all for different branches, tags, parameters, different things that are set up outside of the source control too. And then some of the other terms we use at CircleCI, what they mean for us. Taking a top-down approach, pipelines, the result when you trigger work on your projects in CircleCI. Really what that means, the full set of workflows run with the relevant filters in your project configuration. And workflows are a body of work triggered by a pipeline. So just think of it as which job is running and in which order. And a job's a set of commands inside of a specified execution environment. Job runs are a bit in the weeds. It'd be for an individual instance of running a job. Really important once we start talking a bit more about speed and test splitting, the splitting up a full test suite over a defined number of containers. And then, as you can imagine, with so many things just covered off on being defined in the config, might mean a pretty good amount of duplication at some level. The CircleCI has this concept of setting up reusable configuration as well. You can define and customize commands, execution environments, full jobs, take in parameters, and to run conditionally. And then one way to scale this concept, so even across different configs, different projects, is to use orbs. You can think of orbs as CircleCI's package manager, reusable configuration as code, and good for a few main use cases. One which will cover mostly the network of certified and partner orbs. So these are orbs in our registry maintained by either CircleCI or one of our close partners, so someone like a JFrog. If you use one of these, you know that everything is up to date. They include best practices, their versions, so think stability, getting your developers back to what they do, trying not to reinvent the wheel, figuring out how to use a tool. They also include the source code, so you can see what's happening or repurpose them if you want to make them your own. The other use case for orbs include packaging up standard practices for your team to share across config. So if I had a specific way that I wanted to, or a team wanted to use X-ray, for instance, I can make that my own orb. These default to public, which means you can search the orb registry for other ways that developers have found to do things and reuse those. You can also make private orbs in a private orb registry that fits your security and compliance climate a bit better. So with that, I will hand it off to JFrog.
Thanks, Ryan. So I wanted to take a step back and kind of just discuss about, how JFrog came into being and what's the need for JFrog and so on. So as we all know, the software release mechanism is pretty chaotic in the sense that, developers are using more than a dozen technology packages at this point in time. It used to be the case that the entire universe of technologies or packages or languages that developers would be using was fairly minimal. Now it's exploded, and also the amount of the different languages and technologies being used, and the amount of different tools being used to develop software, to release software has just increased multiple folds. The second part about this is that the frequency with which software is being released and developed has accelerated. It used to be the case that, you would have a software update going maybe, every 6 months or every 9 months or so. Now you see organizations actually updating software, several times a day sometimes. And add to that the mix of different environments, the complexity of the environment that software gets deployed into, whether it's an on-prem environment, whether it's a hybrid cloud environment, whether it's an edge node. So all that becomes a fairly chaotic thing for both the developers and the operation teams to kind of handle software updates, to bounce back from any service outages and things like that. And that's where JFrog essentially comes in. So JFrog is an end-to-end DevOps platform that has support for all of these packages that you see, 25 plus, I believe, packages that developers use to write their code with. And then it weaves a system of standard processes and tools, unifies them into a single platform, whether it be the ability to manage artifacts, whether it be ability to scan those artifacts, whether it be the ability to package those artifacts into release bundles, and then kind of deliver software into multiple places, whether it be an edge node, whether it be a on-prem environment, whether it be a multiple cloud environment, and so on. All that is being delivered as a single unified platform. So what does that look like under the hood? So the entire JFrog platform actually sits on the right side of a version control system, as Ryan was mentioning before. So we've got our flagship product called JFrog Artifactory. So what happens is that when your developers commit their code into a version control system, they declare a lot of dependencies for that code. And you need a reliable, scalable, secure way of resolving those dependencies. And so Artifactory is built around the fact to do just that. Resolve dependencies and have version control for those artifacts in a reliable, trustworthy way with attestation that you need. It also has, storage, auditing, security, and other features that you need in terms of managing your artifact throughout the entire pipeline. And when you add something like, for example, X-Ray, which is our scanning tool that recursively scans to identify both policy violations in your software as well as security vulnerabilities across the entire life cycle of the software development, right? So, artifacts being packaged into bills, being packaged into release bundles, it'll scan all of them throughout the entire process and annotate your artifacts and bills with known fixes to be able to allow you to release software securely without any vulnerabilities or issues. And then once you've got all this thing done and you've got a piece of software that can be released now, JFrog operates on the principle of having something called a release bundle that via its distribution product gets distributed to a multitude of edge points, whether it be an on-prem or production server or an edge device and so on. We've added mission control and insights to that to provide, an overall traceability and visibility into the entire process. And we've also got our inbuilt pipelining tool that we can use to orchestrate this entire thing. But the good thing about JFrog and what we pride ourselves with is its universality, right? So it's an end-to-end platform, as I already explained. It's built to scale. So as the consumption of your repositories and artifacts increases, we can scale just with you on that. It's a universal platform in that it supports any binary type, any stack, and any dev tool. So that is something that we pride ourselves with, where we've got numerous integrations with a plethora of tools that are part of this entire DevOps ecosystem. Continuous security, as I already mentioned, we've got X-ray that scans for policy violations and vulnerabilities across the entire landscape. And it's a solution that's available as a self-managed as well as a SaaS offering that is available on a hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environment. And we've got partnerships with many cloud vendors where you can actually host JFrog. So this is what we call our 10-step kind of diagram that shows us how JFrog fits into the entire life cycle. So up top, I'm just going to use my mouse here. So up top here, you see your dev team kind of developing their codes and committing their codes into a version control system while having declared some dependencies. What happens is that Artifactory can actually resolve those dependencies. And then once those dependencies get resolved, it gets packaged and sent into a CI tool, just like CircleCI, that would do the continuous integration and all those necessary steps to actually build your modules with. In the meantime, at the same time, it'll also rely on Artifactory to kind of resolve dependencies as it's building from the committed code that is received from the version control system. And once the build process has been completed, those build artifacts or release or build packages will come back to Artifactory, get stored into Artifactory, where throughout the entire process, it'll use X-ray to kind of scan for vulnerabilities and policy violations. And it'll also contribute metadata to your QA and testing teams with which they can start to do your quality control and quality assurance testing with. Once again that release or that build is complete, it'll go into something called distribution that you can use to distribute that piece of software into a production environment or to a variety of edge nodes that you may see fit. So that's an overview of how it'll work together. I'll hand it over now to Jeff to actually walk us through some of the details on how the integration or the demo with CircleCI and JFrog will come together. Jeff?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Ali. Yeah, so I'm going to kind of lead us into our demo and what we're going to end up doing in this demo. So we're using the CircleCI and JFrog solutions together. So CircleCI will be performing the orchestration part of actually running the build, talking to Artifactory, talking to X-ray to get this going. So what you'll see here is we have a GitHub repository. We have some source code in there. We have a CircleCI config pipeline in there. And then we're using the CircleCI Cloud SaaS tier. We're also using the JFrog Cloud SaaS tier. Both offer free offerings, and so free subscription tiers. So you can use those for free and play around with those. In the pipeline itself, we're going to do a build. We don't have a formal test in this pipeline just to save on time. But then we will do some security checks on the resulting packages. We will do a release, we'll do a promotion, and we'll deploy to a staging environment, and this will end up being AWS. As to actually what we'll be doing, with the pipeline, we'll be using CircleCI with the JFrog CLI. The JFrog CLI is used with a lot of our CI/CD tools to interface with Artifactory and X-ray. So what will be happening in this pipeline is we'll be building the NPM application. So if you're familiar with NPM, we'll do an NPM install, which pulls down dependencies. These dependencies will be pulled through Artifactory. When we build the NPM package, we'll be using NPM publish. And then we'll publish that package to Artifactory. Next we'll do is a Docker build. So we'll take that NPM package, build a Docker image, then also push that to Artifactory. All along the way, we're collecting build information, which is very important for traceability. And then what will happen is once those packages, there's an npm package and a Docker image that are pushed to Artifactory, X-Ray will scan those for vulnerabilities and identify vulnerabilities for us. And then once that's complete, we'll simulate the deployment stage by deploying to Amazon ECS. So that's taking that Docker image and deploying it into Amazon ECS. We have a cluster sitting there with some tasks. So at this point, I'll talk about the JFrog CLI. So this is a pretty powerful tool that we have that you can use for any sort of automation, but particularly for CI/CD tools. What you'll see is the CircleCI pipeline will use this to help build the packages, help build the images. It'll automatically collect that build information. It'll manage pushing those artifacts to Artifactory. It'll manage pulling down dependencies needed for those packages. And it'll also trigger X-Ray to do these security vulnerability scans. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Ryan, who will kick off the demo.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to share my screen and give it a couple seconds to load. Is that loaded?
Yep, we can see it.
All right. Okay, so when I had handed this off to Ollie, I had just merged a pull request, which would kick off a pipeline. So I wanted to show that. You can see it here in main. So I'm going to go from GitHub. I'm going to jump into one of these jobs, and then we'll talk about the pipeline. So this is directing us here to a workflow page. I'm actually going to run back to this page. All right. So in the CircleCI UI, I finished my slide section and merged the PR, and I just want to cover what we did on the board in the classroom, taking a field trip, and just see all this stuff in the wild. So I'm going to walk everyone through what Jeff went through and really what CircleCI is doing under the hood. So see all the work that's been kicked off on the pipeline page from the VCS. We can filter further on the branch level or the project level, depending on how your organization is set up. You'll jump into this most recent workflow. I'll talk about this in a sec, but you can see it's at a manual hold, which is a convenient step if you need to have eyes on it and have someone approve before you go through. So I will finish off this pipeline. Again, workflow is just which jobs are running and in which order. And each job focuses on a specific piece, checks out the code fresh in the environment specified. So these are all using Docker executors, so a Docker image to do all these steps on top of. But if you have other needs like a VM, Mac, Windows, custom hosted runner, something that needs to sit behind your firewall, they can all live together in the same workflow, side by side in harmony. You can see we run some tests here. These are node tests. This one handles the, as Jeff mentioned, just a quick node test, especially for the free tier. This one handles the building and scanning of the Docker image. There's that manual approval we talked about. Promote and then send it over to AWS. And I'm going to pull up the config side by side so we can see what's going on. As I mentioned, the config is really the source of truth here. So let's see. If this set up, so you have orbs, you have the executors. So those are those reusable configuration pieces that I had mentioned. Two really big ways to use it, but if you want to use commands and do other pieces, you can absolutely do that here. So you can see we have a few orbs being specified that we're using. Our factory one here, as well as the ECS node one for some of the caching to set that up out of the box, and then browser tools for some browser testing. And then the executors here, we have the node one that we'll be using predominantly. You set it once, and you're able to use it down here. So I also define the workflow down here. So again, it's just which jobs are running and in which order. So if I look at that promote, that only runs on main branch. It requires the hold to go, and that's just how you set up that dependency graph. The build test node will go every time a pipeline is kicked off. And a couple of different ways to use orbs. So you can distill full jobs down to a few lines of code. So you can see that this ECS job is not set up here. It's actually just defined completely down here. It's a glorified job, and you just plug in a couple parameters to use and you're off to the races. The build, scan, and promote jobs, those are other really good ways to utilize orbs as well as some other custom commands that you want to run. So you can see we're configuring the Artifactory pieces up here, but then you can run some basic commands executed via the shell. Same with the build scan. You have a couple different orbs being used. So you have the node install packages, which takes care of all the caching, installing the packages, really getting up and running and trying to get fast. And you can see that over here. So it runs a couple of these pieces, tries to speed up the installing the node modules, which is a really fun thing to wait on usually. So it's nice to have that cached. And then a couple different orb pieces and then different commands that are run a bit differently. So again, really just that execution environment. So we specified the node image that we're using and the steps to run on top of it. So really straightforward way to go about it. And this we're again building a Docker image, pushing that to JFrog registry, running some X-ray scans, doing a lot of things, all just step by step listed out in the config file. And this covers up all the things that the commit really needs to go through before it's successful. Like we talked about in an early slide, from that ideation, the VCS, all the way being delivered to the hands of customers, and ECS is the last step of this workflow. So I'm going to hand it off to Jeff. So I know we also want to know that what's happening when it goes out to JFrog and does stuff in Artifactory and X-ray and what else is going on under the hood. So with that, I'll let Jeff take it over.
All right, thanks, Ryan. I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here. Just a sec. There we go. All right, so I'm going to talk about the interaction with Artifactory and X-ray and how our packages get built and how they get sent to the repository. So Ryan just kicked off this pipeline, this job here. It's running completed. It's deployed the packages. So I just want to review kind of what's happened here from the Artifactory and X-ray point of view. So in this pipeline, what we've done is we've installed the JFrog CLI that we had talked about earlier. We configured it. One of the first things we wanted to do was build an NPM package. So we've configured NPM with the JFrog CLI. Ryan talked about how we use cache to speed up the pulling down the dependencies. So this is the NPM install step where we pull down those dependencies. We save the cache for any future jobs that we have. So this is the first part we have the interaction with Artifactory. So we do an npm publish here. So that pulls all those dependencies, creates this npm package, and then sends that to Artifactory. And puts it in a repository. Next thing after that is we publish some build information. So again, we're collecting a lot of build information, things like environment variables. We also push that to Artifactory. Next thing we do here is we build a Docker image. So we take that package, we build a Docker image, and then we push that to an Artifactory registry. And then we do we collect some environment variables, and then publish some build information. We trigger an X-ray scan, so we'll see what that looks like. And then the final step after this is deploying to AWS ECS. So I'll show that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to our Artifactory and X-ray instance here. This is in our free cloud tier. So the first thing I'm going to show here is the two packages that were pushed from the CircleCI pipeline. So these packages are called, start with demo. So we have the npm package. So this is a demo-app npm package version 1.0. And then we also pushed this Docker image demo build. One thing I want to highlight is we did npm, but Artifactory is a universal package manager, so it supports many other languages, many other package types. If I come over here, you can get a quick view of those. So whether you're developing in Go or Java, use Maven, you support many package types. We can support your full software development cycle from doing the software package all the way to do like a Docker image like we've done here. So let's take a look at one of these packages. Let's take a look at the Docker image. So I'll go ahead and click on that. So this is the Docker image. We've pushed a number of different versions here. This is the last version we pushed. So we'll click on that. And then we can see here it's been scanned. So we scan it for security vulnerabilities. We can take a quick look at that. So we have identified a number of security violations. So what we've done with the pipeline is when we've run that X-ray scan, we've just gone ahead and let it gone through, even though there were some vulnerabilities. Typically what you do, though, is if a vulnerability is identified, you would go ahead and fail that pipeline, and you'd come back and fix the vulnerability and then kick it off again. But for demo purposes, we've let it run so we can see what it looks like here. So we identified a number of security vulnerabilities. I can click on one of these. And it will give me some detail here on the package that's impacted. It'll give me a summary of that vulnerability. It's identified it's a high severity vulnerability. It'll give you the CVE for it, and then some additional references too if you want to go through and understand the nature of that vulnerability. In some cases, it's just a matter of upgrading the version of that library, and we'll indicate that here too, so you can take those steps. One other thing I'll point out too is X-ray also provides license compliance for maybe like open source licenses. So let's say for some reason you don't want to use any MIT licenses in your organization, you can check for that and stop those type of libraries from being used. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click into the builds. So each time we run that pipeline, it creates a build and a build number. And this is where all the build information and the published modules are gathered. So we have this one module that was produced. These are all the artifacts that were included in this module. In this case, a Docker image, so this is a manifest. If I click on environment, we have some environment variables that were used to do this build. We already looked at the X-ray data. So you'll see the same thing here. Then we do have JIRA integration. So if you had some JIRA tickets that were involved in creating this build, that would show up here. We don't have any diffs set up, but the next thing I will do is show you the build info. So again, this is used for traceability. So as you're creating that build, again, a lot of environment variables are kept here, version information, build agent. So what else we have here? All the modules that were involved in this build. Yeah. And so what else we're going to show here? Another thing I want to show, we go back to the Docker image. Click on this version again. You can also show the Docker layers that were used to build this image. And then finally, we will show when it was pushed to the repository, it was stored in this local repository. And then what that looks like in the local repositories. These are to view all the repositories that we've created with Artifactory. And so for the purpose of this demo here, we've created a Docker virtual repository. And then what a virtual repository is, it's an abstraction having in this case, a local repository behind it and some remote repositories. So Artifactory can act as a proxy to Docker Hub or bin tray and pull those dependencies through those. And then likewise, we've done the same thing with NPM. So that's the interaction with Artifactory and how we push our artifacts there. Next thing I want to show you is in the pipeline what we did with deploying, in this case, that Docker image to AWS ECS. So if we go back to the pipeline. So once we built that Docker image, there was a step here where we did an approval. We've promoted that Docker image. And then last thing we did here was then we took that Docker image, we pulled it from Artifactory and deployed it to ECS. So if you're not familiar with ECS, ECS is a container orchestration product provided by AWS. It's similar to Kubernetes, but it's AWS proprietary orchestration engine. And so I'm going to jump over to ECS and show you here. I have a cluster that was created, I'm calling it the JFrog CircleCI demo cluster. And then in that cluster, I have some tasks already set up. So tasks are kind of like Kubernetes pods. They hold the container. They control how many replicas are deployed. And so I have this task sitting here. So each time I run the pipeline and I create the Docker image, I'm going to create a new version of this task and deploy it immediately to this ECS cluster so that I can see it. And so I'll take a look at the tasks here. And then we can see what I want to point out here is here's this container image. So you notice the name of this container image or this Docker image. It's coming from our Artifactory instance. It's coming from that Docker repository. And this is the demo build container image. And so this was just deployed into ECS. And then once it's deployed at the end of that pipeline, now we can go here and we can view that package and image that we created. So let me go ahead and pull this up. And there you go. So this was the application that we built. So this was the NPM package that we created. Again, at the Docker image. ECS created a new task definition, a new task version, and pulled it from Artifactory and then deployed it. And so with that, that's the end of our demo. Now I'm going to hand it back to Charlene for any questions that we might have.
All right, guys. Sorry. Can you hear me okay? All right, great. Yep. So we have gotten some questions in, but there's plenty of time. If you've got a question for any of our speakers, go ahead and use your question and answer tab. Let's go ahead and dive right into the questions we've gotten. John has a great question for all of you guys. He says, let's suppose that in addition to the NPM team's output, there is a Java team that also has output that needs to go into the Docker image. Let's see. Each of these teams has multiple developers that all want to independently run instances of this pipeline to test their code. How do we manage handoff between all of their individual sub-pipelines and the Docker build? And if QD takes a week of testing to fully validate across multiple stages. And note that the Java and the NPM team are working independently, so the Docker build piece will fetch a pre-built artifact from the other team, but the local build from the local team. How does this scenario get configured both for the build process and the artifact selection? That's a long, convoluted question there. I don't know who wants to take that one first.
I can answer part of it to start. Or go ahead, Jeff.
No, go ahead, Ryan. I think you're probably going to start off with the CircleCI piece, but
yeah, I was just going to mention. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of the pieces inside of CircleCI had to string things together, especially with a JFrog. If you look at the, let's go to the config file. We're actually using the SHA. CircleCI had some built-in environmental variables. So you can tag images and be able to find things across, either using the UI, using the API, so you can start like programmatically piecing a lot of these things together. So using the tag and then other environmental variables that are set up here. It'd probably be a good amount of conditions, and it's a great question, John. You're happy to also dive in later if you want to talk offline or at all. But probably some combination from the CircleCI side of different environmental variables and stringing together pipelines, different parameters. I can hand it over to Jeff.
Yeah, and let me go ahead and share my screen. Yeah, so I mean, the purposes of our demo were it was a pretty simple application. It was all an end-to-end pipeline. In reality, like you said, you're going to have a large team with multiple components to this application. And so you're likely to have many jobs. And so in our pipeline here, we built just an NPM package and we did the Docker image at the same time. But likely what would happen is we would have a single pipeline for that NPM package. And then we would push it to Artifactory. And then typically what you would see in a larger organization when you have these repositories is you would have like a dev repository, a staging repository, and then finally a production repository. So you might have a dev pipeline that builds that dev package, gets pushed to a dev repository, and then you deploy it to a dev environment, you do your testing there. So you can imagine each of the different teams, whether it's a Java team or an NPM team, would have their own separate little pipelines that does that. Once it gets past those stages, that's when you would have like a you might want to call it like a systems integration test pipeline that kind of pulls from the, say, dev repositories of all these different teams, maybe builds a one-up Docker image or deploys maybe multiple Docker images to an environment, does some testing. So you can kind of see where I'm going with that and how you would handle in a larger organization. Hopefully that answers your question.
All right, guys, we do have plenty of time for question and answer period. We've got another one here from Yahoo asks, how does it hold/approve a release bundle for each development state, QA/regression, then approve and distribute by SaaS ops into production each month? I'm not sure who that one is actually geared toward, but hopefully that'll be somewhat easy for you guys to answer.
Yeah. Ryan, I think maybe that's referring to the hold step in the CircleCI.
Yeah, I can chime in there. So like the manual approval step, and I'll share my screen again. So something like up here. And the hold step will pause and hold for as long as you want it to. So you can have as many manual approval steps, or you can conditionally string together pipelines and run continuations of different workflows. So you can just stop it here. It's really just a convenient step to make sure someone gets eyes on it. People use it for different things. It can be integrated with a Slack webhook as well. But that would probably be the way to integrate that. And then you can also choose who can approve it through a concept we have called context, which are restricted environmental variables. So if you have to have secret keys to your ECS, you can ensure that's only restricted to certain teams. So you have to have someone from the QA team have approve it. They're tied to a certain security group at GitHub and therefore can only approve it and only inject the keys for the ECS job. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that too. I think in our demo, we didn't include a test stage here after the build scan. I think typically you would have a test stage here, and then if those tests passed, then you would go ahead and do that promotion, and then you would have the hold right before you deploy to production, because you probably want someone that can manually approve that and not have it automatically go to production.
All right. All right, guys. As I said before, lots of time for questions. We still have about 17 minutes or so to the end of the webinar, so lots and lots of time for questions. Here's one for you. What are the self-hosted runners for jobs?
That one should be for me. So I mentioned that you could use a Docker, Linux, Mac, Windows, or a self-hosted runner. So if you want to, with our cloud product, run a specific job, talking about keys and context behind a firewall, you can also install Go binary, really, and actually have access to some of those resources without having to set up a Bastion host or a VPN to access those resources. So your job can use a different execution environment that you set up and own.
All right, great. Okay, next question here. No. Okay, here's a JFrog question for you, Jeff or Ollie. How does the JFrog CLI manage the NPM package and the Docker image?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. Let me go ahead and share. So the JFrog CLI is really just a command line tool. It's actually written in Go. What it does really behind the scenes is talk to a very extensive REST API that we have in Artifactory. So we have a public documentation page, and then on here we have our REST API. I'll show you that. So, I mean, you don't have to use the JFrog CLI. It does make things quite a bit easier, but you can if you wanted to create your own homegrown application to talk to the same REST API that the JFrog CLI uses. So over here on the right here's all these things you can do with this REST API. So you'll see on here, pushing build info like we did. We have build promotion, artifacts and storage. Here we can come over here and see where we're retrieving artifacts. We're deploying artifacts. And so that's really what the JFrog CLI is doing behind the scenes. Now, as far as managing NPM packages, if we come over here, so the JFrog CLI is pulling these dependencies through Artifactory. And then when I mentioned earlier, we had this NPM repository that acts as a abstraction for some other repositories. In this case, we have, if I come down here, it shows that we have a local NPM repository. So this is a repository that's local to this Artifactory instance. And we have this NPM remote repository. So if I click on the remote repository, this is really just a proxy to npm.js, which is the public NPM repository. So when the JFrog CLI is pulling down these NPM package dependencies, it's pulling them through Artifactory and then pulling them directly from npm.js. And then these packages end up being cached on this Artifactory instance. So that's one benefit you get out of using Artifactory. So next time around, when your developers are trying to do another NPM build, it'll be much quicker because it's pulling directly from this Artifactory instance. And then one thing I'll show you here, I'll click back on packages. So you can see that there's a bunch of packages already here. These were pulled from npm.js, and now they're currently being cached on this Artifactory instance. So I think that hopefully that answers that.
All right. All right, great. Got so many questions that have come in, and they're really good ones. So I just want to keep plowing right through them. Next question, I think maybe Ryan, this one is for you. Are there any ways to speed up the Docker builds?
You share my screen and get off mute.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's a good question. So everything you have in this repository we saw is on our free tier, but we do have some other abilities to speed things up. So see the building the Docker image from scratch takes almost closer to 3 minutes. We also have a functionality Docker layer caching you can add to your config. So you can cache Docker layers. It's just mounting an external volume to run these Docker commands. So you can really speed things up. And if there are a few things change or they're changed much further down in the layers, then it'll be much quicker and almost instantaneous.
All right. All right, great. I think we have a follow-up. John just sent in a follow-up to his question that we just addressed. The first answer suggested that one would have multiple repositories, such as dev, staging, release, etc. How would one get the granularity down to individual developers and their individual development cycles? Creating and destroying repositories sounds like very heavy admin overhead.
Yeah, let me think about this one. So you wouldn't have individual developer repositories necessarily. I guess it depends on what the developer wanted to do. I think a lot of their development and testing would maybe be done locally, but you would never need to delete repositories. You can have control permissions who has access to particular repositories. So you can have different repositories for different development teams. Hopefully that answers that.
All right, great. Well, hopefully, John, hopefully that answers your question. If you still have a question, please send me another follow-up and we'll try to get it answered for you. Okay, another great question that has come in. I think this is a JFrog question. How does X-Ray determine the vulnerabilities it finds?
Yeah, so we use a commercially available, pretty comprehensive vulnerability database called VulnDB. And so we'll pull those vulnerabilities from that VulnDB, and we'll use that to scan our packages. And it supports scanning all different package types. In this demo, we showed NPM and also Docker, but others as well.
All right, guys. So we're about 10 minutes to the top of the hour. We have time for a couple more questions. So if you do have any last minute questions, go ahead and send it on in either via the chat or the question and answer tab, and we'll get to it hopefully. Okay, another question for you guys. How are the package dependencies managed? I think that's another JFrog question for you guys.
Yeah, I think I actually covered that a little bit in the previous question. So when we're doing that build, it's pulling the package dependencies directly from Artifactory. What I can do is I'll go ahead and share again what we're looking at here, and go a little bit more in depth on what we did. So in the pipeline itself, what we did, we installed the JFrog CLI that was installed as an orb. But one step we have here is where we've configured the JFrog CLI. So what we've done is we've configured the JFrog CLI to use the Artifactory server, which is this instance that I was showing you guys. So this is off our free tier. We've configured some Artifactory URL. We've configured some permissions. And so this is an Artifactory user and an API key. Once we've done that, all dependencies are pulled through this Artifactory instance. And like I just previously showed you, we did an NPM package. And so when the JFrog CLI wants to pull down the packages for NPM install, it'll pull it through Artifactory, which in turn pulls it from npm.js. It pulls them into Artifactory first, where they all get cached. And then it finally gets pulled down to CircleCI, where it's doing the build. So hopefully that answers that.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Another question for you here. Yeah, actually asked another question. Can you tell us more about JFrog distribution feature? I see a tab for it.
Yeah. Ali, you want to handle that, or you want me to handle that? You're on mute. I can handle it.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say, go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. Yeah, so distribution is another product we have. It's mainly used for release. So the idea here is, you build all your packages. You create what's called a release bundle. And so this can have a number of packages in it. And this bundle is immutable. So once you create this package, you can't change it. It's signed. And then it's a way to provide a formal and secure process for releasing software to the endpoint. And the endpoint could be like a data center. It could be like a point of sale device. So that way, once it gets released as a release bundle, it's final and that's it. And so these release bundles are used for enterprise organizations at scale, deliver across like Home Depot have many in-store systems. And so we'll deliver these release bundles to all the stores.
Cool. Cool. All right, guys. Right now, it looks like that's all the questions that have come in. I'll leave the question and answer tab open in case anybody does have any last-minute questions they want to ask. And while we're waiting, just a quick reminder to the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be available on the devops.com website. So you can go look for it there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. We just got one more question in from John, who asks, let's suppose on the Java team there are devs Anne and Barry. Anne is working on version 2.0 of the product and needs to work against a stream of NPM candidate outputs from Charlie on the NPM team. Barry is supporting version 1.5.1.1 for an urgent fix against a stream of NPM candidate outputs from Darlene. Good Lord, so many people. How would everybody select the artifacts that they need?
I don't see that question in the.
It's in the public chat.
Oh, okay.
Chat, yeah. So sorry, I didn't move it over to the question and answer section because it just came in. So.
Okay, let me read through this again.
Yeah. And also, quick reminder to everybody: stick around because we are doing the drawing for the 4 $25 Amazon gift cards at the end of today's webinar. So after we get this question answered, I think we'll be closing it out and doing that for you.
Yeah, so I think, I guess the way I would answer this is you'd probably create a variable in your pipeline to store the version of artifact that you would need. And so in the case that you would create this Docker image with the artifact, you would dynamically have that version in there to grab the correct artifact. I think that one, John, if you maybe want to reach out, we can have a deeper discussion on that. Probably understand a little bit more about how your team is doing that.
All right, John. So please know that we've got a copy of all the chats also. So John, we'll make sure that the folks over at JFrog and CircleCI get a copy of your questions so you can get some follow-up there for you. Okay, everybody, that is all the time that we have for the question and answer period. I do want to thank everybody who did submit questions, and if we didn't get to your question, I apologize, but please know that as I just said, we will be getting a copy of all of the questions that came in over to the guys at JFrog and CircleCI, so they'll be more than happy to follow up with you offline to make sure that your question gets answered. And then, as I said before, the webinar is going to be available on demand. We'll be sending out an email, and it's also going to be on the DevOps.com website, so you can always go look for it there. And without further ado, let's go ahead and do the drawing for the 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Our winner today, winners, first one today is Tamara C. Congratulations, Tamara. Our second winner is Juan P. Congratulations, Juan. Third winner today is Leo H. Congratulations, Leo. And our fourth and final winner is John B. Congratulations, John. We'll be following up with all 4 of you via email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. If you don't see it there in your inbox, please check your spam folder. All right, guys, we did have a couple questions that did come in. We can do them real quick if you want. I mean, because we've got 2 minutes or so if we want to maybe do one of them. What do you guys think? Yes, no?
Sure.
Or you want to, okay, all right, great. So here's one from Florian who asks, can I store the keys for signing the release bundles inside or images of an external service, like inside of an HSM, or does the key need to stay inside the Artifactory server?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do not know the answer to that. I'd have to do some research on that one. So sorry about that, Florian.
All right, great. Well, Florian, we'll get you the answer offline. All right, and then the last question here: how can we stop the pipeline if we found any security issues from X-ray and Docker images?
Yeah, I can take that one. So when we ran the X-ray scan, there's an option there when you run the scan to have it fail to build. So it'll return an exit 1, which would stop the CircleCI pipeline. We just didn't have that turned on for the demo, just so it can run through all the way and deploy it to AWS ECS. All
right, guys. One last question came in. Let's go ahead and do it, and then this will be the last one, I promise. Brian asked, do we have a way to reject the manual approval on CircleCI so that all jobs downstream get canceled?
Yes, absolutely. The other option is just approve or cancel. So if it's canceled, everything else won't go.
All right, awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We had so many great questions come in, and I think we actually did get to all of them now. So that's awesome. Thank you very much. But like I said before, if we didn't get to your answer, if we didn't get a full answer for you, you'll be getting you'll be contacted by somebody at the organization to make sure that you're answered, that you do receive the answer. But Ryan, Jeff, Ali, great conversation, great presentation, lots of fun stuff. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. And judging from the the conversation that was going on in the public chat and the questions that came in. I know the audience got a lot out of it too. So thank you again for your time. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.
Bye.
Okay, see you. Bye-bye.